and welcome to Caribbean Connections. I am Dionne Ligoure, the head of corporate communications at Caribbean Airlines, and I am delighted to host this series of conversations with leaders from various countries and sectors in the region and throughout the diaspora. Caribbean Connections is a platform to engage with luminaries and stakeholders to get their views on issues impacting each of us, with a view to stimulating meaningful discussion and to get a bird's eye view into some of the Caribbean's leading personalities. This is our first episode, and we are happy to have as our guest Mr. Anthony Ali, the CEO and Managing Director of Goddard Enterprises, one of the region's most successful companies. Goddard Enterprises has a multifaceted approach to business, which spans the areas of manufacturing, airline catering, building supplies, financial industries, and automotive, really on a multinational level. Mr. Ali has led the company since 2013, and prior to joining Goddard Enterprises, he worked with the largest soft drink manufacturer in the English-speaking Caribbean. He has a wealth of experience in the areas of operations, sales, marketing, customer allegiance, and strategic planning. And he really has shared that sort of knowledge with several Fortune 500 companies in Canada and the United States. It is our pleasure to have Mr. Ali join us from beautiful Barbados. Mr. Ali, welcome to Caribbean Connections.
Thank you very much. And I really do appreciate the opportunity to participate in your program.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure, and we will get right into it. You are very well known in business circles in the region based on the extensive experience that we've just outlined. We would love to hear more of your story in your words, so please share it with us.
Okay. Well, if I had to summarize it very quickly for you, I would basically say I'm a nerd. And by that, my parents emigrated to Canada when I was very young, 3 years old. And so I grew up in and around the Greater Toronto area, mainly in Oakville. And I had the opportunity to go to the University of Toronto, where I pursued my undergraduate degree in quantum mechanics and statistical thermodynamics. And having done that, I then pursued an executive MBA at the University of Western in international marketing. But from a experience perspective, my parents, like most parents, want their children to become doctors. But everybody told me that I would have a horrible bedside manner. So I chose to go into research instead. And that's where I started my career. I started off doing research in chemistry and environmental sciences, and then some high-tech research where I had some great opportunities to work with in the Los Alamos National Laboratories down in New Mexico.
Wow. Yeah.
And with a think tank for General Dynamics, which is a military supplier in Sandia, California. And so I've had some really good experiences in research, but quickly realized that if I really wanted to have an impact, that I would have to transition out of research and get into business, unless I really wanted to become a world-class expert in one particular area. And so I basically was encouraged to apply for this McKinsey fellowship. And so I was one of 6,000 people that applied. I was one of 3 that was successfully chosen. And I went off and did a McKinsey fellowship. And that's basically where I made the transition from sciences into business. And while at McKinsey, I focused on strategy and leadership. So all of my engagements were focused on that. And when I came out of the fellowship program, I was able to transition into business, started off doing strategic planning for a Fortune 500 company, and then eventually decided that in order to enhance my career, I needed to get some real international experience. And so I applied for a position in Trinidad, and then eventually ended up here in Barbados working for Goddard Enterprises.
Well, this is it's a most interesting story, from the idea of medicine to research, and then you've landed into business and back home, so to speak. You've worked in a range of industries from what you've indicated: pharmaceuticals, manufacturing, but where does your passion lie? Which industry would you say has had the most impact on your growth and, of course, the sharpening of your business acumen?
I would say the McKinsey Fellowship was a very intense multi-year program that forced a significant amount of learning and discipline and adherence. And I'd say that more than anything else, more than any of the educational programs, my MBA or anything else, really helped me to refine my skills, allowed me to learn from a consulting perspective about clients and client needs and how you relate to clients. And I think the most important message there was, how do you have influence without control? Because as a consultant, you're there to provide services, but you're not the decision maker. And so the question is, how do you influence and guide and have input without actually having that direct control? And that really comes down to being able to communicate effectively to people, let them understand the importance of the particular projects that you're working on and what the key objectives are and how you can help them focus on delivering those objectives.
Understood. So it really is about getting the lessons that you have learned in McKinsey. And of course, McKinsey is known globally as one of the leaders in team acceleration, a leader in strategic planning, and it really is a tremendous place to cultivate knowledge and to grow your knowledge. And when I did my master's program myself, I participated in what was known as the Accenture Challenge, which has a close affiliation to McKinsey. And I always remember it was a dead heat to the winning team. And my team didn't win, which to date, the lesson I took away from that was the judge told us, who came from McKinsey, they said, we had we couldn't do anything other than, you all were neck and neck. But the last team said, we would be grateful for your business. And that was the differentiating factor. And I've taken that lesson with me throughout life, always, regardless of something being obvious, state the obvious. There are times when you need to. Now you've been at the helm of the leading catering company in the Caribbean, and Goddard and Caribbean Airlines enjoy a very close relationship, which we have enjoyed for many years. Can you give us some insight into the dynamics of the industry from a catering perspective? It's not often we get that insight. We know from our side the technical aspect of it, the maintenance, the customer aspect, but from a catering, we love to get your insight.
When you think about it at a simplistic level, it sounds fairly, a very basic business. You're putting meals on a plane. When you get into the details of it, trust me, it is far more complex than people understand. It is a very highly regulated industry.
Absolutely.
And there's a significant amount of consistency that has to be applied. And so the processes that are put in place are extremely, extremely difficult to understand. As an example, we can be audited by any airline at any point in time. They can simply walk in and say, we would like to see how you're performing. We are HAPCP certified, we're IATA certified, and they walk in and they pull our logs and our records and they check every single thing that we do. Another example is for one particular airline, an international airline, every single meal that we produce, we have to produce 2 samples which go into a special box, And those are flown over to the UK. And when they're frozen and when they arrive, they're tested. And they do all sorts of phytosanitary inspections and testing and bacterial testing on those meals. And if we fail, we get a warning. If we fail a second time, our contract is suspended. And so, you have to be meticulous in exactly how you prepare these meals and the types of processes that have to go into making sure that every single meal is consistently prepared and of the same quality, the same size, and everything else. I'll give you just one other quick example there. From a regulatory environment, we have some kitchens where the knives are barcoded. And when an employee comes in to work, the employee is assigned a knife. The knife is scanned into their ID. And when they leave, that knife has to be registered and scanned back into the system. And the reason for that is, imagine if a knife ended up on a tray or in a cart that ended up on a plane. You now have a weapon on a plane. And so we have to track all of these things. We have to report all of these things to the airlines every single day, so that from a safety perspective, we know exactly what's happening and we participate with the airlines from that perspective. So it's a challenge.
Well, I'm actually happy to hear all of this. As a caterer within a business that is highly regulated, the regulations extend to you as well. And there are considerations that let's say the layperson will absolutely not even think about, that we as a matter of course must think about. So, it's wonderful to get that perspective, to see the level of detail that has to take place in the preparation of the wonderful meals that eventually end up on board. How do you see Caribbean-based businesses measuring up to our competitors on the international front? And what sort of, little words of wisdom you can offer to our regional-based companies?
Well, I think the first thing I would say is don't undersell yourself. Having worked internationally, being responsible at a global level for teams in China, Japan, Europe, Africa, literally the entire continent, I can tell you that we are as good as anybody else. We have very, very talented people within the region. When you think about Fortune 500 companies, these are large organizations that have extensive processes and standard operating procedures in place. And when I look at our companies within the Caribbean, we are very much the same. We have great products, great people. I think the one area where I think we are a little bit behind is in what I'm going to call innovation. Fortune 500 companies spend a lot of time thinking about the next generation of products, the next generation of services.
Indeed.
And in the Caribbean, I think that we've not done a very good job of leading in that particular area. I find a lot of times we see complacency, where we're really good at what we do and we compete really well within the Caribbean region, but we're not often enough benchmarking ourselves with the best in class at a global level. And so we sit back and say, well, look, I'm as good as the next guy beside me, but am I as good as the best? And I think that's the mind shift that we really need to get. When you look at really, really good companies, I will tell you that some of them get too good. They become so excellent at what they do. They have these blinders on and they tend to not focus on what's going on in the competitive environment or what's going on in an innovative environment that could come along and displace them. And you hear, experts talk about this all the time, white swan events, black swan events. You hear about, disruptors in the industry.
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that we don't do enough of, is think about what could come along and disrupt us and how do we plan for that in advance. I think that's probably the biggest thing that I think differentiates the Fortune 500s from who we are. They are constantly trying to reinvent themselves, and we don't do enough of that. We need to evolve if we're going to continue to grow and compete at the international level.
I couldn't agree with you more. Here in the region, we would do well to have some significant focus placed on innovation. We are naturally creative people. You see it all around us, but it is to really hone that creativity to take us to the next level. So it has been a good exchange, a wonderful conversation. In closing, as we go, Mr. Ali, do you have any further insights that you would like to offer to persons who are aspiring to be CEOs of established companies like the Goddard Group, or even to be the CEOs of their own businesses? What can you offer?
It's surprising how little people spend time thinking about their careers. Most people I know kind of just meander through and end up where they end up. And so the first thing I would say is most young people today need to think about how you engineer your career. Be specific about the experiences you want, that you have to achieve in order to get where you want. I will tell you, I'm one of those that planned every single step of my career. I set goals and objectives. As an example, coming out of university with the very first company I worked with, I said I wanted to be the youngest vice president in corporate history. And that was the goal, and that was an objective. And I went off, and I didn't do it. I didn't achieve it. I tied it. I became a vice president at the age of 32. But you know what? It was a very, very clear objective, and I knew what the outcome was. And I then said, okay, in order to achieve that, what do I need? What are the experiences I have to have so that when an opportunity comes up, I am qualified for that? And so that's the first thing I would say is you are responsible for your career. Engineer it yourself, plan it out, and make sure that you have objectives that you can achieve. From a person trying to start up a business, from the entrepreneurial point of view, I would say that ideas are a dime a dozen. I mean, everybody I know has a good idea, and they are hundreds of good ideas. I've even come up with one or two of them. The real challenge is the execution of that. And so I tell people, focus on the execution, on the deliverables, rather than focused on perfection. And I think that's one of the challenges that I see we have today. People are so focused on getting it right the first time that they're not willing to take those risks, and they procrastinate and they don't move forward. I would suggest to anybody, focus on execution, get it done. You can always make course adjustments as you go. You can tweak, you can refine, you can do anything, but don't get stuck in the quagmire of procrastination and trying to think every single solution out. Actually get in there, experience it, and you'll learn, you'll grow, and you'll fail sometimes. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with failing. That's actually a great learning experience. But you can then modify, get up, and start going again in a slightly different direction. So again, that's what I would suggest to people. I'll also like to leave with them one tip, which I was given at a very young age from one of my coaches and my mentors, as a CEO that I worked for one of the companies. And the man was just absolutely brilliant. I won't say his name, but I was working on a project, and I worked really hard and thought I did an amazing job. And I went in to make this presentation. And halfway through the presentation, he got up and he started to walk out. And I was shocked. And basically, he turned around at the door and he said, let me give you some advice. Involve me, I'll be your partner. Don't involve me, and I'll be your judge. And oh, by the way, you were just judged. And he walked out. And that has never left me. So again, the point there is collaboration, communication, and involving your stakeholders in what the outcome is. I think that is a critical thing for success.
Mr. Ali, take care, continue to remain safe, and thank you for conversating with us this morning.
Great, thank you very much. Really enjoyed it, and looking forward to my next flight on Korean Airlines.
Indeed, enjoy it.
Take care.
Take care, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Mr. Ali, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It has been delightful chatting with you. The insights that you've provided are golden nuggets for persons whose careers are already underway and for those who are just starting. Quite insightful, very useful. And this is what Caribbean Connections is about, connecting with the leading minds in the region to provide insight and knowledge. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to our viewing audience. We'd love to get your feedback, so please send it to coopcom@caribbean-airlines.com. That email address, coopcom@caribbean-airlines.com. You may follow our social media channels, LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at iFlyCaribbean. I am Dionne Ligoure, and this has been Caribbean Connections.